Right now, a complex and fast-changing weather pattern is taking shape across the middle of the country, and it is about to put tens of millions of people in the path of severe storms over the next several days. Today and tomorrow, thunderstorms will fire across the Great Plains, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley. And these are not ordinary summer storms. We are talking about significant damaging winds, large hail, and isolated tornadoes across a huge stretch of the country. Behind all of that, another big storm is already lining up for the weekend. Cold Canadian air will keep sweeping into the Great Lakes and the Northeast, while intense heat surges north into the plains. The atmosphere is loading up. Let's break it all down. There's a lot to cover today, so we're going to start where the danger starts, and that means the severe weather threat over the next few days. Today is Tuesday, and the Storm Prediction Center has drawn two large slight risks of severe weather across the country. The first one stretches from Texas all the way north into Nebraska. The second one covers Minnesota and Wisconsin. Around both of those, there's a big marginal threat that reaches from the Midwest down into the southern plains. And there is one more marginal threat sitting across the southeast. So this is not a narrow one-state event. Storms are going to be possible across a massive footprint today. The type of threat you face is going to depend a lot on where you live. The headline threat today is wind. Significant damaging winds are possible, and that includes the risk of 80-mile-per-hour gusts. If you live in Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, or even New Mexico, this is the part of the forecast you need to pay close attention to. An 80-mile-per-hour gust is not a normal thunderstorm gust. That is the kind of wind that snaps tree limbs, knocks down power lines, damages roofs, and flips anything that is not tied down. If you have trampolines, patio furniture, or anything loose in the yard, take a few minutes today and secure it before storms arrive. Hail is also on the table today, and the main size we are watching for is up to golf balls. Golf ball-sized hail will crack windshields, dent vehicles, and beat up siding and roofing. If you have the option to park under cover today, take it. And if you get caught driving when hail starts falling, do not stop under an overpass. Find a safe place to pull off the road, stay in your vehicle, and get away from the windows if you can. Then there is the tornado risk. Today it is a low tornado risk, and it is focused on Minneapolis, Duluth, and Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Low does not mean zero. We will probably have at least a couple of rotating supercells out there this afternoon and evening, and it only takes one of those to produce a tornado. Bars. So if you live in that part of the upper Midwest, make sure you have a tornado action plan ready to go before storms arrive. Know your safe room. Know how you're going to get a warning if you are asleep or outside. A live stream is possible today, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Now let's move ahead to Wednesday, because the severe threat is going to shift east in a big way. The focus tomorrow moves into the Midwest. Believe it or not, Illinois is right in the middle of it again. The threat also covers Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. That slight risk and the surrounding marginal threat stretch all the way down into the lower Mississippi Valley. And on the other side of the country, there's also a slight risk of severe weather in eastern Colorado. The biggest risk tomorrow is once again damaging wind gusts. Out in the high plains, 80-plus mile-per-hour winds are possible again. That is a serious number, and it is the second day in a row that the same part of the country is dealing with that kind of potential. Everywhere else, we are watching for isolated to scattered damaging winds from the southern plains all the way back up into Michigan. That is an enormous corridor, and it means a lot of people are going to hear thunder tomorrow afternoon and evening. Large hail is also in the forecast Wednesday, and the areas we are watching most closely are near Lafayette, Fort Wayne, and Springfield, Illinois. If you live in or near those cities, this is your heads up to plan ahead. Move the vehicles into the garage tomorrow morning if you can. It is a small step that can save you a very expensive insurance claim later in the week. And here is where tomorrow gets more serious, because we do have an elevated tornado threat for Wednesday. That higher end area is mainly near Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it extends into extreme southern Michigan, where a few tornadoes are on the table. That is a real, specific threat, and if you live in that zone, tomorrow is not a day to ignore your weather alerts. Around that, there's a large 2% tornado threat, and the list of cities inside it is going to get your attention. It includes Chicago and Joliet, and it reaches all the way back down through Kankakee. At this point, that should not really shock anybody. Illinois has been the state of tornadoes in 2026. That same area also includes Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Toledo, Ohio. So we're talking about several major metro areas with millions of people all sitting inside a tornado threat zone on the same afternoon. There's definitely a higher chance of a live stream tomorrow, so make sure to click the bell icon down below. That way, you get notified the moment we go live if storms start to organize. All right, let's get into the actual timing, because knowing when the storms arrive matters just as much as knowing that they are coming. We will start with what happens today. This afternoon, we are expecting a few supercells to form over, around, and just north of Minneapolis. The first storm should start going up around 4 to 5 o'clock. Watch around Duluth and all up and down the I-35 corridor for those initial storms. Early on, they will likely be scattered and isolated, and that is exactly the storm mode that supports the strongest updrafts. If those storms can mature and grow in size, there is going to be a real risk of an isolated tornado. The window we are watching most closely is between 6 and 8 o'clock, especially near the Wisconsin and Minnesota border. That is the sweet spot this evening. If you live along that border, have a way to receive warnings during the dinner hour, and do not count on hearing an outdoor siren from inside your home. While that is happening farther north, there will be additional storms spiraling near our low pressure system over in Canada. Those storms could also produce significant wind, along with an isolated tornado threat of their own. So we are actually dealing with two separate storm clusters in the same general region, which is one of the reasons this setup is more complicated than a typical August afternoon. By about 7 o'clock, storms will continue pushing through Rice Lake and heading toward Eau Claire. That is when western and central Wisconsin needs to be fully alert. Storms moving through that area will be carrying the wind threat, the hail threat, and that low but real tornado risk all at once. After 8 o'clock, the storms will keep tracking northeast and make their way into the upper peninsula of Michigan. If you live up there, expect your active window to be during the late evening rather than the afternoon. Gusty winds and heavy rain will be the main story as those storms arrive. Then, during the late evening and overnight hours, most of our storms are expected to weaken. The tornado threat should die down after about 10 or 10:30 Central Time across Wisconsin. That does not mean the storms disappear, though. Weakening storms can still produce strong gusts and dangerous lightning, so keep that in mind if you are heading home late tonight. Into the overnight, that storm system will bring showers to the Midwest and the Great Lakes. It will be a wet and unsettled night for a lot of people, and if you have an early commute Wednesday morning, expect slick roads and reduced visibility in spots. Now let's drop down to the Central Plains, because today is shaping up to be a very stormy day there as well. A few supercells will once again be possible in northern Nebraska. Those storms will carry the risk of isolated large hail, damaging winds, and maybe a low tornado threat. Isolated storms in that part of the country tend to be intense, so even a small number of them can cause real problems. Then, during the evening tonight, we are expecting a large cluster to form. That is when the threat changes character. Instead of a few individual storms, you get one big complex, and that leads to a widespread, damaging wind threat. The areas we are watching most closely are Colby, North Platte, and Garden City. If you live in those communities, be ready for the possibility of a long-lasting wind event rather than a quick storm that passes in 10 minutes. Wind damage from a cluster like that can knock out power for hours, and it often happens after dark when people are asleep. So charge your phone this evening. Keep a flashlight nearby. And if you rely on medical equipment that needs electricity, have a backup plan ready before the storms arrive. As we head into the early morning hours of Wednesday, there could still be storms out there. The track we are watching takes them toward Kansas City, with impacts near Salina before they eventually weaken. So even if you are outside the main risk area today, you could still get woken up by thunder tomorrow morning. Now let's talk about Wednesday's timing, because this is the day with the highest tornado potential in the whole forecast. Most of our storms should begin around 2 o'clock in Michigan. Those early storms will produce isolated damaging winds, and a low tornado risk will exist right from the start. But watch what happens as we go into the afternoon. Really, during the mid to late afternoon is when those STP values, meaning your significant tornado parameter values, will increase across northern Indiana and also across Michigan. That is, the atmosphere telling us the ingredients are coming together at the same time and in the same place. Storm relative helicity is also going to be elevated across northern Indiana. In simple terms, that means there is a lot of wind shear in place. Wind shear is what lets a thunderstorm start rotating instead of just growing straight up and collapsing. When you combine strong shear with instability, you get favorable conditions for at least an isolated tornado or two. Separate storms are more dangerous for tornadoes. Lines are more dangerous for straight line winds. Based on what we are seeing, I do think we will get at least one, and possibly two, supercells forming around Lake Michigan. Those storms should then cross the I-94 corridor and move toward South Bend during the mid to late afternoon. The window there is roughly between 3 and 5:30 Central Time. That is your highest risk period if you live in northern Indiana or southern Michigan. If you have kids getting out of school, or you are heading home from work in that window, know where you would go if a warning is issued. By around 5 to 6 o'clock, we could have several supercells out there at the same time. That is when the situation gets busy fast. However, I think storms are going to upscale into a line of thunderstorms relatively quickly. Once that happens, the tornado threat starts to fade and the straight line damaging wind threat takes over during the evening hours. That said, for the majority of the mid to late afternoon, that tornado threat should stay elevated. So do not let your guard down early. The most dangerous part of tomorrow is the stretch before the storms merge together, not after. After 8 o'clock, the storms will move toward Indianapolis. At that point, they will likely start falling apart, and they will probably fall apart before ever reaching Cincinnati or Columbus. So if you live in southern Ohio, you may end up with nothing more than some distant lightning and a few rumbles. And as we head into the late evening, everything is basically clearing out across the region. Back over in the Central Plains on Wednesday, our high-resolution short-range guidance does not really show much storm activity across the high plains right now. That could change, and low storm coverage is not the same as no risk. Any storms that do manage to form will produce significant damaging winds, large hail, and an isolated tornado threat. Fewer storms, but stronger storms. That is the pattern to keep in mind. What that same model does show is interesting. It has a big cluster of thunderstorms forming in the Mississippi Valley during the late evening and overnight hours Wednesday. If that were to verify, we would be looking at a lot of lightning, straight-line winds, and a very low tornado risk in place. Overnight storm complexes are always worth respecting because people are asleep and warnings are much easier to miss. This is going to be a trend we monitor closely across the Mississippi Valley and the Tennessee Valley. If that cluster shows up in more model runs over the next day, we will update you on it. For now, just know it is on the radar as a possibility rather than a lock. Now let's move on to Thursday because the severe weather shifts again. This time it goes to the northeast. There will be a low-pressure system passing north of Ottawa on Thursday, and that system should at least lead to an isolated tornado risk. That is not something the Northeast deals with often, so it is worth taking seriously. Otherwise, damaging wind gusts will be the primary concern up there. We will have a little bit of an elevated tornado threat near Albany and Burlington during the late afternoon. If you live in those areas, Thursday afternoon and evening is your window to stay weather aware. The main time frame for storms on Thursday runs from about 3 o'clock Eastern until about 8 o'clock or so. That is a 5-hour stretch where storms will be moving through, and the threat will not be uniform across that whole period. Early on, storms will be more scattered, which is when any brief tornado risk is highest. By the time we get closer to about 6 to 7 o'clock, I think everything is going to be more linear. Once storms line up like that, damaging winds become the primary concern, with gusts up to about 70 miles per hour. That kind of wind can bring down trees, especially in areas where the ground is already soft from rain. Things should fizzle as we head into early Friday morning. There may be one more round of storms over in Pennsylvania, the Washington, D.C. area, and back into New Jersey and Delaware. If you have an early Friday commute in the mid-Atlantic, allow yourself a little extra time on the roads. And if you live across the southeast, we are expecting a pretty stormy Thursday afternoon and evening for you, too. Isolated damaging winds are possible with any storms that get going. This is a pretty typical-looking severe weather setup for the month of August down there, so it is not an alarming situation, but it is one that can still knock out power and ruin outdoor plans. Now, let's look ahead to the late week and the weekend, because a brand new storm system is forecast to form across the northern plains. This is the second half of the story, and it is what makes this pattern so busy. On Friday, there could be some isolated severe weather over in the Dakotas, Nebraska, and maybe southwestern Minnesota. Nothing widespread at this point, but enough to keep an eye on if you have outdoor plans to close out the work week. On Saturday, a more organized sort of severe weather appears more likely if you are in North Dakota or Minnesota. That is the day where the new system starts to really come together. If you have weekend plans up there, keep a close eye on the forecast, because Saturday looks like the most active day for that region. Then on Sunday, that same storm system may lead to at least an isolated risk of severe weather in the Midwest and the Great Lakes region. I want to be upfront with you, though. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with Sunday. The details are still unsettled, and that means the forecast could shift in either direction over the next few days. In fact, there could actually be a second storm that forms in the Central Plains on Sunday. If that happens, it might lead to at least some isolated severe thunderstorm activity as we go into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. That activity could show up really anywhere from the Central Plains all the way into the Great Lakes region. So the start of next week may stay just as active as the start of this one. As we go into the middle of next week, which is already the first week of September, there is a lot of uncertainty right now across the United States in terms of where we are going to see storm activity. When you get that far out, the models start to disagree, and it is better to tell you the truth about that than to pretend we have it nailed down. One thing that is becoming a little bit more likely, though, is that we could have our first hurricane of the season form in the Atlantic. That is a big deal after the season we have had so far, and it is worth watching closely. Now, it is important to note that no tropical storm has formed yet. Until that actually happens, we do not really know if this will become a hurricane. But the odds of it seem to be pretty high, and here's why. This system will be moving into a fairly low shear environment. There is plenty of moisture available, and there is not much dry air for it to work against. Those are the ingredients that let a tropical system organize and strengthen. Most models and ensemble groups have this staying well out in the Atlantic Ocean at this time. That is good news for the coast, but if anything does change, we will let you know right away. It does look like it will become a pretty powerful storm system. out over the Atlantic Ocean. If we go over to the outlooks from the National Hurricane Center, there's right now a 70% chance of formation over the next 7 days in the main development region. That is a high number, and it is the reason this is on our radar at all. We are also still watching a little area northeast of Bermuda that has about a 40% chance of becoming a tropical storm just over the next 2 days. So keep an eye out on that one as well. And then there is the Pacific Ocean, which is just on its own level right now. We have had so many tropical systems out there that we are already on the letter I, and we are going to be under the letter J very soon. On top of that, we currently have 3 areas of development, and all of them have at least medium chances of formation. None of these are currently expected to impact the United States, but we will be keeping an eye out on all of them in case anything ends up trying to go up toward Mexico, or even California, or if something tries to head toward Hawaii. Tropical systems can shift, and it costs nothing to watch them. Now let's switch gears and talk about temperatures, because they are going to be on their own roller coaster over the next several days. This is the part of the forecast that affects everybody, not just the people under storms. The heat is mainly going to be confined to Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, along with the desert Southwest. If you live in those areas, this is a familiar late August story. Stay hydrated, limit your time outside during the afternoon, and check on older neighbors and anyone without good air conditioning. Meanwhile, cool air will continue to sit over the Great Lakes and the Northeast. It is going to be phenomenal weather up there. Open the windows and enjoy it, because this kind of comfort in late August does not come around every year. We will get another shot of cold air on Friday across the Midwest. Temperatures during the morning on Friday will fall into the 40s and 50s for most of Wisconsin and Minnesota. That is genuinely chilly for this time of year. If you are heading out early Friday, you are going to want a jacket, and you may want to bring in any sensitive plants overnight. Then by the weekend is when the heat is going to start surging north. So if you live in Kansas City or Omaha, Nebraska, temperatures are likely going to get near 100 degrees by Saturday. That is a sharp turnaround from what those areas have been feeling, and rapid heat swings like that are hard on the body. Plan indoor activities for the hottest part of the day, and do not leave kids or pets in vehicles even for a minute. On Sunday and Monday, that heat will start pushing a little farther east toward St. Louis, and it will spread into the Mississippi River Valley toward Memphis, Tennessee. So the heat is not staying parked in one place. It is going to move with the pattern, and more of the country is going to feel it as the weekend goes on. Then during the early portion of September, we are expecting this heat to continue for the most part across the central and southern plains. Temperatures could get really hot during that first week of September over in Kansas. If you have outdoor work or events planned there, start thinking now about how you will handle the heat. Meanwhile, that cool weather should continue across the northern plains and the Midwest. Just some phenomenal weather once again for that part of the country for this time of the year. It has been an amazing summer if you live in the Midwest, and great for outdoor activities, unless of course you have been the one dealing with all the severe weather. So let's bring it all together. Today, storms fire across the plains, the Midwest, and the upper Midwest with damaging winds, golf ball hail, and a low tornado risk. Tomorrow, the threat shifts into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley with an elevated tornado threat near Fort Wayne in southern Michigan, and a large area of risk covering Chicago, Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Toledo. Thursday, the Northeast takes its turn with damaging winds up to 70 miles per hour. Then, a new system builds for the weekend across the northern plains, while heat surges north, and the tropics start to wake up in the Atlantic. If you live anywhere in these risk zones, take a few minutes today to get ready. Make sure your phone alerts are turned on. Know where your safe place is. Have a flashlight and a charged power bank ready in case the lights go out. These are simple steps, and they make a real difference when a warning comes in at the worst possible moment. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button down below so you do not miss the next update. Click the bell icon too, because there is a chance of a live stream today and again tomorrow, and that is where we will be tracking these storms in real time. We will likely have another video tomorrow with the latest data. Stay weather aware out there, take care of each other, and we will see you in the next one.